I wake from my deep and luxurious dreams. I always rest well. The sleep of the just. Of course, this does not come without knowing how one can best unwind after a full day of good works. Like most, I have my luxuries. For the worshippers of the corpse guard, this could be an heirloom toothpick, a comb, perhaps a sidearm, antiquated but effective. They have such small dreams, because they are suffocated by lies, their souls crushed under duty, their vision blinkered by deception, and their very existence as miserable as is possible. But I have different masters, more bountiful ones, and thus my luxuries are somewhat more grand. I unfurl every limb, every muscle, stretching wide and expansively. I feel the tension in my whipcord muscles. I bask in the sumptuous satin coverings as they brush against my skin. I'm a devotee of the Prince of Pleasure after all. My eyes finally pop open, and I instantly roll from my bed in a burst of activity, exhilarated by the thought of what is to come. Today will be a good day. I have foreseen it. Yes, it is finally time. Some of my brethren blanched when I confirmed the little they required to know. They mewed about trust and betrayal and the perfidy of the Hydra. But this is why they are where they are, and I am where I am. Trust. There is no such thing outside of the trust one must place in the Dark Lords, the gods of chaos. I trust that they, the Alpha Legion, will do as agreed because of the threat and payment they have received. It is a transaction, one backed with force that they would not wish to draw down on themselves, even they. For my master is as mighty as any who serves the primordial powers of truth. But they forget one thing, amongst others, actually. Amongst all I have met, all I have heard of, none can match my gift for scrying. None. I have immersed myself in the currents of the future, to the extent that I have almost drowned. But where others would, or squeal and return to themselves, shorn from the warp and its glittering future, there I have endured. I have learnt many things from the future, the past and the present. I am a wayfarer and manipulator of fate. It is, after all, why I am now blessed to stand at the left hand of my master. For he only takes the best unto himself. Only the best. And of them I am his second. Not in wrath, of course. That is his right hand. But I am the one he speaks to, the one he sends out, the one he uses to move the universe, his seneschal, ambassador, and proxy. His right hand he keeps close, caged, sat at his side ready to be unleashed on any that draw his ire. I turn and view my grand bedstead. Perfect, of course. But I now need that which it contains. I extend my hands and languidly perform the 100-hand mudras while whispering the holy words that support them. My connection to the warp is so strong. The effect begins before I have even finished my last holy stanzas. The bed shifts, its coverings creeping back like petals on an opening flower. Reality shifts further as the bed itself sunders down the middle and rolls back to each side, revealing that within. And there he is, my last true brother. Ah, how long it has been since last we spoke. I pace toward the sarcophagus like a feline, savoring every second. I reach it and brush aside the 2 humans I used last night and then encased beneath my bed. Their wailing, clawing, and thrashing giving me endless peace during my slumber. Their desperation and despair adding a fine vinaigrette of fury to the dreams of my brother. A dressing that made the dining so much more palatable. I could feel their minds ending as they eventually sucked on air, empty of life-giving oxygen, all while merged again with my brother, his dreams adding a sonorous underscore. My luxury. Hardly my only one, of course, but perhaps my most cherished. But now, after all these years, I will wake my brother fully again. I pull his sarcophagus out with a few yanks. The exertion, the screaming in my sinews, feels wonderful. I then recline on the front of it, the metallic tomb that contained the amniotic fluids that gave him life as a dreadnought all those years ago. Many nights I turn his fluids to acid. Not strong, mind you, just enough to add a new layer of stimulus to his anguish. He is always in pain. I am made sure of this. Yet it is in the ebb and flow of different levels, layers and intensities that the mind is not permitted to grow too accustomed to any one stimulus. He will never get used to this. He has not thus far in all of the 10,000 years since I did this to him. You see, not all of my brothers were as clear on the nature of reality, not as certain of their love of their lord. And when the decision was sent to us, in our small outpost away from the main expeditions, the choice had to be made. Truth or lies. Alas, most of my squad brothers did not come out on the side of truth. So I explained it to them in the only way they could understand. The only way their martial heritage and idiotic Terran training would permit. Violence, of course. But when I bested one after another of them, it was Verok, Sergeant Vondar, who put up the most spirited resistance. Not unsurprisingly. And so it was with a special glee that I crippled him. Mauled instead of murdered. When I look in his mind some nights, I can see myself in his eyes as I coo at him and carry him in my arms to the depths of the ship, to the place where I then had him interned into his sarcophagus. So much has happened since then. I cannot naturally remember it, but through his eyes, it is all brand new again. The sarcophagus. One that could be placed into a dreadnought, of course, although I should not use that description, for it was only months later that the changes began. The beautiful metamorphosis he went through to become a Helbrute. And not any Helbrute, I can tell you. For I certainly would not sleep above him each night. Oh no. He is one of the best. I tormented him for centuries while waiting for musters or between strikes. He is now far more to our way of thinking, if what he does can be called that. I lay down on his tomb and placed my cheek against the warm metal, my ear against his walls. A paltry expenditure of power, and the nail on my index finger extends. Another, and it shimmers and becomes spectral. I slowly dip it against the metal box, and then through it, drawing my one claw against the line of the sack in which Verok is entombed within his jail. The one thing he can feel. I can sense a spike in his awareness under my caress. A shudder of fear amongst the rage and pain. Despite wanting to die with every atom in his body, Verok cannot let go. He cannot deny his base interest in continuing, even in the face of an existence so pitiful. To be my plaything for eons untold, only unleashed at my whim before being torn again from his housing and returned to be the foundations of my peaceful slumber. His pain is not only sacrament to me, it is also a tether. He reminds me from where I came, who I was. How mighty I have become. I pull back my nail after one last prod that would seem to be just a hair short of enough force to burst his second skin. A last threat before I prepare. The doors open at my signal, and in process menials bearing my armour, one menial for each and every part. Once I've donned said armour, they will of course be threshed. They are not worthy to put their horrible paws on my finery, so they will be punished. Well, best is more the case really, for such as these, fed to the furnaces to pay our masters their due. Fully clothed in my warplate, my icons, my litanies attached, tears, blood, and viscera of sanctity used to dedicate my armour to the service of the gods, as I dedicated my mind and soul. The menials go to their doom now, as I truly enjoy the next moments. I drag the sarcophagus inch by inch, yard by yard, mile by mile, until I get to the hangar bay. I take pains to knock into every last outcrop, corner, or obstacle as I go, buffeting that within. I sweat under the arduous challenge of it all. I am Astartes in my warplate. My strength is great, but even so, the sarcophagus is heavy. Of course, I could wave a finger and remove all weight from it, have the very air carry the thing to its destination. But where's the fun in that? Let it never be said that I take the easy route at the expense of ceremony. I have moved him thus in the scores of times I've permitted him a brief visit back to reality, back to being able to interact with it, back to a tiny glimpse of sensory stimulation outside of the pain I deal him every second of every day. He's my last brother of the Crusade. He deserves this accolade, this honor. He's also special. Like everything around me, he is special. My shock when it was discerned was palpable. I had considered old Verrock weak, but it turns out he was adult, for none other could deny the core of the divine, the word of our father Lorgar, the truth. Yet he was no coward, and soon I found he was no weakling, for he is the rarest of things, an alpha. I have him loaded, as getting him here is the only part of my personal ritual. Then board the ship myself. We fly to the middle of nowhere, as agreed. Days on end with nothing but the pilot and my entombed brother to distract me. For some this might be inconvenient, annoying, or even interminable. But I turn inwards to my contemplation. Like the child copying the father, I meditate on what is to come, as our father, as Lorgar Aurelian does, even to this day. Eventually we are met by a fleet, small but compact. As the ships of the Hydra burst into light and life through a rent in space, we hail them. Precisely on time. Very difficult to manage, all things considered. Yet despite this fleet belonging to our allies, the Alpha Legion, not one ship has their sigil or banners on it. But I suppose that is for the best, as irksome as it may be to my sensibilities. One should never hide their love. It should be proclaimed from the highest mountains. I am sure their love of the gods is as bright as my own, but they are comfortable hiding in plain sight as their strength, though I find it disdainful myself. We fly into their hangar and are met by a formal embassage. Odd, but the Alpha Legion are never predictable. Tedious pleasantries were exchanged with their lord, a marine called Alfarius, of course. Aren't they all? We are placed in a comfortable suite of rooms, nothing sumptuous, almost austere. So much like our original conveyances, a Crusade fleets. The Alpha Legion pretend so well that I sometimes wonder if they are acting for the benefit of onlookers or for themselves. But no matter. It is necessary if I am to make the very special rendezvous with a very special individual. And in keeping with this, it has been agreed that my escorts will form something of a distraction. I cannot be interrupted in this venture, after all. We travel for weeks, despite having all of the force of the winds of the dark gods at our back, buffeting us forward in the warp. Yet still it takes time. Eventually, we reach the point of no return. I have my brother's sarcophagus placed within his frame. He is whole again. Yet I have cast soporific spells and dweemers on him. He will be activated when they sever the ties. I pass my allies the lotus flower that will need to be crushed to release him from my curses. And then I transfer to the small sleek vessel that will take me to my destination. Of course, I know when the major event will happen, when my brother will be unleashed. I allow myself to be shown to my diminutive quarters on this tiny ship. It is enough. At the allotted hour, the moment I have prophesied, I sit and clear my mind. I am going to enjoy this. Again, my hands dance into figures and shapes few have ever knowingly performed the correct application of power, and there it is. A small plate is filled with my blood. Its murky red then seethes and shimmers until it comes up in stark relief, the blood reflecting a distant scene from reality. It begins. My brother is led to some huge doors that open as those guarding him quickly withdraw. I can see why immediately, as the contents of the room moves towards the rising blast doors. There are a half-dozen things inside, all now lurching forward, all approximately of a standard size, excluding the warping effects that make them trail tendrils and other growths, blessings of our lords. They are beautiful, but they are about to learn a very swift lesson. My brother is now encased in his Helbrute, previously a dreadnought, twice the height of a marine, 4 times the girth. He is mechanical and feral power combined and personified. The other Helbrutes inside do not recognize it, have no familial bond to stay their wrath, no reason to allow him to exist. Hence they bellow their fury and they charge at him. He waddles inside and the doors close. The lotus is crushed and my effect on him is lessened. Never severed, of course, but he no longer dreams. He is now there, in the room with them, and he takes immediate action. His mighty arms he raises and brings down on the front of the first to reach him, smashing it backwards and off its feet. He whirls and barges one while sweeping his left arm out and punching through the shoulder of another. He bowls the one down, and then twists and launches the other, the one he pierced, into the oncoming 3 Helbrutes. This continues for a minute or two, only one of the beasts being damaged beyond a simple spell to fix. But in that minute or two, my brother has shown his ascendancy over his peers. These beings of rage and wrath, he is now their leader. He is their alpha. I told you he was special. For it is a common affair when legions meet and coordinate a campaign. Something we noticed on the first Black Crusade, if I am honest. When groups of our tormented and deranged Helbrutes are combined, and sometimes one stands out above the others, they do not just thrive, they take charge. And thus these rare individuals, the beings able to control themselves and also those around them, they are called alphas. And with so many Helbrutes in one place, we call this formation a Hellfist murder pack. Rather prosaically coined, I will concede, but the name really does leave no room for the imagination. They really do what is stated in their sobriquet. They murder, and they do it with a ration force that is not to be missed. The pecking order stabilized, the ship in place, the damaged brutes repaired by the sorcerers of the Alpha Legion. They are unleashed. The room they all stood in was actually a vast teleportarum, one of the largest I have witnessed since my days on the Vengeful Spirit. But that is definitely a reverie for another time. Needless to say that such a large teleportarum in working order in this day and age is rather the catch. Of course, the ships date from the Crusade era, so I'm not so much surprised as nostalgic again. The room fills with light as the Helbrutes are thrown through the warp at their destination below. They appear. My scrying pool giving me every nuance, showing me every move of not only my brother but all of those within 100 yards. And what a display I am privy to this day. The murder pack splits as soon as it arrives. As the light of their teleportation ends, each one lurches in another direction, the central courtyard of an important location. It is guarded heavily. There are hundreds, possibly thousands of men, who are now rushing from every door, every window practically, into the heart of their Bastille they thought so impregnable. The rain of fire that comes from the Helbrutes is exciting to witness. Entire squads are cut down by Reaper cannon shot, swathes enveloped in brilliant plasma balls, the crack of heavy bolters, the sizzle of las cannons evaporating the beings they hit, all streaking from the Helbrutes. Missiles, flames and melters add their efforts. Nothing can stop the murder pack, as it is led by my brother around a huge edifice. The foe cannot stay at range or they die. Yet when they try to close in on the murder pack, the true fun begins, as my Night Lord friend would say. Each of the brutes is apoplectic with rage, you see. Each one starved of sensation release. This is the only way they can realize their rage, give it life. Each one, a whirlwind of attacks from huge and ancient power fists, now mutated into lumps of sharp protrusions, or club-like and covered with pustules. But each is no less effective for all their blessings. Men are punched back so hard they murder many of their friends on their last trajectory. More still simply explode when struck, like balloons filled with blood. The spray alone is a wonder to see, and an offering to mighty Khorne. So they rampage on. No wall proof from their blows, no weapon able to pierce their vast forms. They do not just slaughter every last person inside. They do not just crush and kill until there is nobody left breathing. Under the adept guidance of my brother, the murder pack tears down the keystones of the structures and brings them all crashing down, burying any few who had hidden in small cubbyholes that my brother's friends could not reach with their massive forms. Of course, the destruction will be noted. It will have taken long enough, been blunt enough at all, for the defenders to have sent off a call for assistance. A distraction. This is what the Alpha Legion call a distraction. Well played, my cousins. Well played. And with all eyes now on a world 2 systems over, our sleek vessel approaches my destination. With the base destroyed, each and every last building brought down, the Helbrutes meandered for a period, aimlessly, until one more figure appeared in a ball of bright light. An Alpha Legion warrior in tactical dreadnought or Terminator armor, he gained the attention of all. They moved to him, some at him. He was in great peril. Or at least he was, until he took out the crushed lotus flower he had been given, and sprinkled a few drops of red viscous liquid on it. At that, the Alpha, the leader of this nasty collection of murderers, was now in his thrall. The Alpha, lent to them by the Word-Bearer, was now under his control. Said Word-Bearer sorcerer was surely now deeply engrossed in his own activities. He would not be able to discern what had happened, until it was too late. For the Alpha Legion did indeed require an Alpha Brute, a leader for their pack of maniacs encased in metal, but not entirely for the reasons they had stated. The Terminator armor-clad Astartes then simply pointed to the distance and began to walk in the direction he had indicated, and on they went. The most aggressive Helbrute keeping the others in line with a swipe of his huge power fists or the growl of his Vox. And on they trudged. It was slow going over the mountains, through the snowdrifts, through the valleys and over rise after rise. On they trudged, the half-dozen huge Helbrutes carving paths in the snow so that the one Terminator-clad warrior could follow. They strode on for days, always on, never tiring, never stopping, never conversing, never questioning. Their leader could not even formulate the thoughts required for a question, but while he obeyed, then all others had done so too. The ice and snow would have damaged even standard dreadnoughts, so bitter was it, but not these, not Helbrutes. For many had self-repairing effects from their many gifts from the dark gods of chaos. Those that did not were so seething with perpetual rage that they would barely have even registered if they had waded directly into lava. But eventually, they came to the end of their sojourn. All now stood before a huge mountain at its base. It must have been larger than any that they had witnessed in all of their long and twisted existences. The warrior in the Terminator armor merely walked to the mountainside and outstretched his hands and placed them on its surface. He fidgeted and shuffled down one side and then up the other, always stopping every 50 paces and placing his gauntlet-covered hands on the side of the mountain again. The Helbrutes stood silent and still, a miracle unto itself, but even they could sense it. Even through the red mist, the blood vision, the rage that had eaten their consciousness millennia ago, even they. And when the search was finally over, the Marine having located the site specifically, he took 20 paces back from it and merely pointed to the area. The Alpha, the Helbrute on loan, led the charge. For a charge it definitely was. He unloaded his plasma cannon into the mountainside again and again. As he did so, the rest of his pack followed suit. Melter, missiles, cannons and lasers smashed into the mountain and began to create a pathway. With the opening begun, the brutes then walked to it and continued their excavation by hand. Each used their huge frames and powerful hands, arms, claws, tentacles to dig into the stone therein. It was hard digging, harder than it should have been for such monsters, and two were lost to cave-ins, their tunnels collapsing due to no supports. But the main thrust of the beasts continued. And at the last, the Marine following them saw glimpses of light, as a final push ended with the collapse of a wall into a cavernous structure beneath. As the brutes walked inside as if in a trance, the Marine crossed the threshold. He was assailed by sights he could not fully understand, could never truly describe accurately, for his lexicon was based in the warp now, all that was or ever could be coined in the terminology and mentality of that place. For others it might not have proven so difficult, for they now stood in what was a pristine and perfect corridor, metals that gleamed and reflected the light that seemed to come from no discernible source. They were just lit. And when the beings walked down the corridors, sections that were in front of them lit up, and those behind then darkened. The corridor then led into a vast chamber, its size only making itself plain as illumination cascaded from the intruders, and kept on going on and on into the distance. The Marine knew that he would not be able to see the other end of it, even if he had taken off his helmet. He also knew from his readings that the air was perfectly safe, perfectly oxygenated, perfectly designed for humans. And all of this in a place that had not seen visitors in what was clearly many millennia. Many. But it was what was inside this seemingly endless chamber that interested the Alpha Legion. Weapons from a bygone age. Things so lethal, so wrong, that they should have been left there. Even the ancients would not use them, had collected and contained them in this place for all eternity. And now, they were in the hands of the Alpha Legion. The room was suddenly filled with the wind whipping all around, despite it being hermetically sealed. The sisters stood in their ranks and raised their bolters as their hair and robes fluttered in the turbulence. As suspected, it was the culmination of an attack. For at the far end of the room, two beings seemed to just coalesce out of nothing. One was a power-armored marine of the Thousand Suns, the mighty Archmage Zamet Haket. The other, a Goliath, even amongst the Astartes, Space Marines. He wore grey armour with hazard stripes on segments. It was Ossus the Unmaker, of the Iron Warriors. Bolter rounds slammed towards them, the air tearing apart with shot and the terrible echo of their reports. But none hit. Not one. A field of shimmering purple energy held all back harmlessly, evaporating them as they struck the field. Zamet Haket looked impassively at the women in black armour as a pair strode forward and flames erupted from their weapons and covered the egg-like shield again. But no flames passed its bounds. He then turned to his colleague and spoke. Adeptus Sororitas, the Emperor's own. Their blood is sacred, so is of worth. Take them, but leave as many alive as is possible. At that, the towering Ossus unsheathed his two-handed power weapon and flicked a switch. Energy crackled down its blade as he simply nodded and moved forward. A flick of the wrist and a hand mudra and intonation from Zamet Haket, and Ossus appeared behind the Sisters of Battle. Ossus's sword swung and cleft Sisters of Battle, but only removing limbs, not skulls, as he tore into them with a fury none had ever witnessed or even thought possible. Zamet Haket entered the bridge of the Iron Warrior's flagship. It was like going back in time, to a period when there had been no heresy, had been no knowledge of the dark gods, for it was functional and efficient. It had no warp twisting or even order, unless one looked intensely hard. It was there, but muted, controlled, unable to fully expand into the space. The Iron Warrior's vessels looked so much like an Imperial at first glance, an unsettling effect on the Thousand Sun who viewed it. Zamet Haket closed on the central figure of Tarax Antarax and opened the dialogue before he was even noted. So, I was not expecting to see you in the comment of the Word-Bearer. The huge form of Tarax Antarax turned and he sneered as he saw the Thousand Sun and retorted. I am in nobody's comet. I am simply making common cause with he and his master, out of enlightened self-interest. What's your excuse, conjurer? Conjurer? I see my assertion has ruffled the feathers of a son of Perturabo. How predictable. So, if it's predictable, why have you set out to annoy me? While on the bridge of my own ship, surrounded by my own men? Bravery, stupidity, or hubris? None of the above. Disappointment. I had not expected the legendary Tarax Antarax to have so short a fuse. I wished only to while away the moments before we arrive. We are here to forge bonds, build bridges, no? No. I didn't agree to join any sewing circle. I don't give a rattling sphincter about your sensibilities, your wishes, or your friendship. We are here to see if we can be effective. If our forces' combined efforts equate to being greater than the sum of the parts. This is why we are here, wizard. If you say it is thus, then it surely must be thus. Allow me to return the disappointment. A thousand son who backs away from a hard topic or fight. What a surprise. I was always told that of all the whelps in the Thousand Sons, you were its most audacious soul. Well, after Arzek, of course. Do not say his name. I still consider him a traitor, a fool who should not be smiled upon by the Crimson King. I will not have his foul name spoken in my presence. Really? Well. I had heard something of all of this, but to have it confirmed is useful. And there I was, thinking you were attempting to gain little secrets out of me, not come to fill me in on all of yours. At that, Zamet Haket's face darkened. Some secrets are for keeping, some are for spending. Ha! What did you get from the expenditure of your precious coin, O snake charmer? That you are interested in the goings-on of our orders, that you are not as stupid as you look, that you have plans of your own, that you would see yourself in the frame of a primary mover. Oh, very incisive, or not. Perhaps I'm just needling you out of boredom. For old time's sake, eh? Something like that. I still remember the days of war between our kinds, after the Rupakar fell, after the Scouring, when we were forced into the Eye all those years ago. Difficult times. Some wounds are still fresh, no? Ha! I enjoyed every second of the trudge from Terra, every second. The endless sieges where we would bleed the sons of the Raven, the Lion, the Wolf, the Praetorian. How they threw themselves at us with such wrath. How we butchered them as often as they did us. I raised in power with every battle, every contender smashed, beheaded, or impaled. I enjoyed every second of it. And of course, I enjoyed the war between the legions. I particularly enjoyed killing wizards, if memory serves. It's been such a long time. I really must reacquaint myself with it. The feeling of wizard blood seeping through my gauntleted hands as I crushed their heads and pushed my thumbs into their eyes, squeezing skull to shattering, pushing until the grey goo squelches around my thumbs. No feeling quite matches it. But the most fun part is, of course, wiping the stinking offal off my hands afterwards, and instantly feeling cleaner because of it. Like my Primarch, I do so despise wizards. Zamet Haket smiled, but it was a thin, unwelcoming thing. Alas, it seems you have only ever faced weaklings and phonies. For this I know, you would not last against a true disciple of the Crimson King. None can. Oh, now that's funny. I seem to remember Prospero being smashed by the dogs, your brothers being the food for their wolves, your towers cast down by them. Did that happen? I was so certain it did. Huh! They needed the Sisters of Silence, Ordo Sinister, and the 10,000 to be present to do it, all while our king fought the urge to destroy them. Well, he was certainly victorious that day. Old One Eye was so good at fighting the urge that the dog took his head off. That did happen, yes? And allowed his apotheosis. In many ways, I believe it to be a sacrifice he made subconsciously. So powerful is the mind of our king. Oh, that's how it works, is it? I sacrifice men all the time, both ours and theirs. By that rationale, I must be a grand wizard then, and never even knew it. You are swiftly closing on the borders of my patience, Captain. So, what are you going to do about it? Chant in a dead language while rocking backwards and forwards for comfort? Or what I always suspected? What I always knew would happen? Nothing. You are correct, of course. I could release my will and restructure reality to my whim, destroy you and every last iron warrior on this vessel. But I will rise above your petty slings and arrows. I shall do the thing that the gods have done for so long. Ignored you. At that, Tarax and Tarax stepped closer to Zamet Heket. I would genuinely enjoy watching you try. Go on. No? That is the real difference between us, wizard. You grub around in musty libraries in search of tricks and advantages, begging and praying to others for power. I take it. What you call power has no worth, and that is the only thing we agree on, for I feel exactly the same about your parlor tricks. And with that, a wind whipped up for a second, and the wizard was gone, transported back to his own quarters, by his will alone. The next the two were together was the day of the event. They had sent sub-officers as proxies to represent them in the scheduled meetings, verging on insulting, but only verging on. But both now stood side by side, only meters between them, as they looked out from the bridge's vast screens. Beneath them was the shrine world of Eleusis, still under repairs it would seem, or new construction even, for once, not so long ago, during the Age of Shadows, it had fallen to chaos. Then the very holy church, the ecclesiarchy, had been corrupted and spread the foul teachings of chaos to the entire population. The streets were places of hunting packs, the cathedral smeared in filth and excrement, or plain pulled down. All was desecrated, all was degradation. Until finally, the anchorless crusade had come with the burning fire of faith, and they took back Eleusis with bolter and blade, purging all that crept and crawled the face of the planet. Then they brought a new populace, reconsecrated every last inch of the surface, and Holy Mother Church pumped resources into the planet to return it to the brilliant beacon it had been. It was heavily defended, for the Sisters of the Adeptus Sororitas were present in strength, a formidable opponent to most, but not to Chaos Space Marines, not they. The fleet had made it into orbit, and were clearing the remaining special defenses with attack craft and precision strikes. Again, to anyone else the defenses would have been formidable, possibly enough to dissuade even the most determined assailant. But this was the Iron Warriors, aided by the Masters of the Warp, the Thousand Suns. Their combined might swept all before them, with ease. Now the two, Tarax and Tarax, and Zamet Heket, seemed to bask in the fruits of their labor, as the last minor starbase exploded like a flower of gold and silver, grey and fire. As the flare subsided, the two turned as one and looked each other in the eye. Ready? Oh yes. Are your men making good progress? Oh yes. They'll be at the outskirts of the main city in a quarter of an hour. At the gates within another quarter. Our barrage makes that inevitable. The distraction is in play. Excellent. Your guns do not shoot the citadel itself, I hope. At that, Tarax Antarax raised an eyebrow and dipped his head slightly. Then I shall be away. Oh no. You're not going alone, not for this. Zamet Heket just inclined his head slightly and said, Of course. Would you care to join me? Again, no. I don't do witchcraft. If I want to teleport, I'll use a set of Terminator armor, thank you very much. But don't worry, you can take my Master of Executions, Ossus the Unmaker. I'm sure he will keep an eye on matters, and ease your passing into the inner sanctum, of course. Of course. Zamet Heket stretched out a hand to Ossus, with a simple pendant on it. You must wear this against your flesh, if you are to come with me. The large marine looked at his master, then extended his hand to accept the pendant, and slipped it over his head. And then the two of them seemed to blow away on the wind, a wind that had not been there only moments before, leaving only sand where Zamet Heket and Ossus the Unmaker previously stood. Ossus the Unmaker was a truly gifted warrior. The Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, were armored-in powered warplate of their own, were as nimble and vicious combatants as any mortal humans who had ever lived. But he was an Astartes of the Long War. He had danced this dance 1,000 times before the grandsires of any of the sisters presently before him had even been born. And the skill and power levels quickly told. Appearing behind the block of them as he did, Ossus tore into the sisters with his power sword, taking arms and legs from multiple sisters as he went. Some turned to engage him, evading him where they could, firing back when possible. But Ossus knew his armor, knew his skill, knew how this entire conflict would map out before his first sword swing. He was Ossus the Unmaker, the first sword of Tarax and Tarax, of the Iron Warriors. He was born for this, made for this, trained for this, and he enjoyed himself mightily. The other half of the sisters were still firing on the 1,000-son sorcerer before them, his shields held, and then he waved and formed one sigil after another, with light coming from his fingertips. When each was tied off, it became a baleful effect. Sometimes it was a direct expression of hate, energy that shot out from his fingers and smashed and burnt all before him. Other times his spells would force a sister to her knees, screeching as her head turned inside out, or her eyes exploded, or armor constricted to crush those within with sickening crackling noises. But he left most alive, as did Ossus. After less than a minute, the hall was littered with incapacitated, dead, and unconscious sisters of battle, and then the two Marines just nodded to one another. It was then that their attention went to the central segment of the hall, a raised platform with stairs leading up to it. At its apex, a plinth. Atop the plinth was a simple cylindrical object of brass. The sorcerer ascended the stairs slowly, while the Iron Warrior stalked to the door to make certain they would not be interrupted. 2 steps back from the plinth, Zamet Haket stopped. He then extended out his arms expansively, and a myriad of runes erupted into light across the entirety of his armor. The lights then seemed to pull out of the armor and fly above and around the wizard. They formed rings and chains around him as they twisted and twirled. Then one after another seemed to break off from the chains and expanded as it was projected towards the plinth. Shield after shield were torn down, as runes on the plinth lit as they then evaporated on the breeze. It took a quarter of an hour or more, but eventually the final ward was torn down, and the 1,000-son then let his arms lower. Reverently, he reached out with his left hand and caressed the length of this simple horn. It was simple, unadorned, unblemished, and buffed to a shine. But it was ancient. Ancient beyond the Imperium, beyond the Age of Wonders, beyond the Age of Expansion. It was old as man, and its power was writ across it. Zamet Haket then took up the horn in his left hand. He turned on his heel, and then motioned for Ossus the Unmaker to stand back with him. The Iron Warrior padded back, leering at him as he went. Zamet Haket then put the horn to his lips, and blew. And a note rang out, as it struck the walls and floor before them. The very rock itself seemed to float apart, all above it, all around it, simply started to levitate and separate. Within 1 minute, the 2 Marines could see the entire front half of the building had been affected thus. The rocks, metal, wood, fixtures, all was just slowly floating apart. They locked on, as each part then exploded back away from them. It was a tidal wave of destruction that went on for a half-mile. The Iron Warrior turned to the wizard and nodded in approval. The wizard lowered the horn and stroked its length while gazing at it. This would tear down the defenses of the corpse worshippers. This would make a mockery of all of their efforts to protect themselves. The crusade could finally begin. It was writ. So it would be. The crusade could begin. Chaos Space Marine Possessed. Story continued from entry 4, Demon Weapons. Tarax Antarax looked on, shark eyes behind heavy lids, a fixed sneer on his face as he watched the pantomime. Strangely, his expression was utterly matched by the man to his left, Zamet Haket. The Iron Warrior and the Thousand Sun were of a single mind in this one circumstance, for it would have been laughable if it were not so astonishingly sad. They both sat there as co-hosts to this strange assortment of Astartes. Zamet Haket, a lord of magic, Tarax Antarax, a horror of temporal might. Both were bored and annoyed, for exactly the same reason. They were children, these Marines. This is what they had devolved down to, watching these idiots perform what they thought a great blasphemy in front of them. Spittle ran down the icon of the Emperor, sticky runnels collecting at its most pronounced points and dripping from it. Pathetic. They all lined up, standing in their power armor, festooned with childish script and useless markings. Not 1 ounce of power between the myriad of scroll. They had flesh on their armor, barbs and trinkets galore, heads, teeth, eyes, ears, all hung from strings around necks, or attached to waist or wrist or backpack. It was a joke. As if they had been shown pics of Chaos Marines and decided to shallowly copy what they thought they saw there. They knew nothing. Tarax looked to Zamet and rolled his eyes as the previously loyal chapter spat on the image of the Emperor. He made a small circle with his finger, only for Zamet to see, clearly indicating that they could round this up swiftly. To which the sorcerer actually snorted in mirth. It did not go unnoticed by the leader of the Marines. He was no chapter master, no captain. Those had been affixed to the prow of the battle barges of the recently fallen chapter of Marines. Their highest-ranking lord was no more than a lieutenant. But he had somehow taken his entire brotherhood into the waiting clutches of the dark gods of chaos, had risen up and arranged for the capture and torture of the previous leadership. So he thought he was the bee's knees, the very epitome of all that it was to be a Chaos Marine. At the sound, he rounded on the 2 true Chaos Lords and glared at them. But he knew he was on thin ice. He held his tongue, but the effort was real. Tarax and Zamet could almost taste his anger. Tarax broke the silence as the officer just stood looking at him. "This is a fine display of your perspective, I am sure, in your mind. But perhaps we can dispense with the rest of the gobbing display and crack on to a real test. A real sign of your devotion." Zamet Haket also spoke. "Yes, I find I must agree with my brother of the Iron Warriors. It shows you despise the Emperor, but that does not mean that you love the true Lords of the Universe." The lieutenant shifted his stance, shuffling as he was utterly shocked. His men had been defiling the image of the Emperor, had brought with them 10,000 slaves as a gift to the existing Chaos Space Marine Lords, had approached them and expected to be welcomed with outstretched arms. It was dawning on the lieutenant that his estimations of his new-found friends was not as desperate as Imperial propaganda may have led him to believe. He gulped and began to truly listen to them, to watch everything they did more intently. And he could now see the disdain that they held for him and his men. Utter disdain. "You know, Zamet, I now feel that perhaps we should gain a better picture of the worth of these Marines, the true depths of their newfound faith. and I think I have the way to do it. Well, more to put it, you do." At that Zamet nodded. "Go on, explain to this Marine, and to me, what you envisage." "Well, nothing shows devotion as much as a joining. Up for it? Or got a toady that can perform the rites involved?" Zamet responded, "Child's play. I will have one of my acolytes officiate. Now all we need are volunteers." At that, he looked back at the lieutenant and beamed. It was probably the most harrowing thing the officer had ever seen, for it was matched by the widening grin of the Iron Warrior. The lieutenant had a strong feeling like he was a chicken and they were both foxes. But he had no choice. If they turned on him now, they would annihilate his marines, seize his assets, his battle barges and fleet. He was walking on thin ice, and he knew it. So he merely nodded his agreement. Only hours later, the applicants had been identified. Zamet Haket and Talax Antarax did not know if this was by lot, by choice, or by diktat. But they were provided with 2 scores of volunteers. And the process began. It was not swift, and it was not easy. Over the next week, which was pushing it quite radically, stated Zamet, it was done. They had been prepared at a breakneck pace, and the casualties had been higher than normal. But both Chaos Lords just gently chortled to themselves when informed of the progress. So when the ritual was done, there were only a dozen Astartes who had survived the ordeal. Hours of chanting and bells, candles, screams, sacrifices and spells. The event took a full 24 hours without break, so Zamet Haket and Talax Antarax appeared only for the last hour of the proceedings. It was a horror to witness. Disembodied beings of pure spite brought into real space, and then forced into the bodies of the Astartes who had undergone the preparation. The Silver Graves chapter command, what was left of them anyway, had been summoned to witness the end of the ritual, to bask in the glories of the power of the true gods of the world, they were told. At the end of the rite, the beings in chains at cardinal points in a massive circle, all twisted and shifted constantly. Their forms no longer static. Even their appearance in the real universe was flickering at points, making them seem to disappear then return in the blink of an eye. Tarax walked the circle with Zamet and took each one's jaw in his hand and pulled them so he could look in their eyes. Each one had a pair of red irises, shifting as they looked into his own face. Tarax seemed more like a huntsman, gaining ascendancy over curs and stray dogs as he prowled the circle, checking each one. The 2 of them then processed to the officers of the Silver Graves. Well, they now called themselves the Sick and Sickle, but that meant nothing. It was a name only. For as he approached the would-be traitor Marines, he saw their ashen faces, their gorge only barely being controlled. As expected, thought Tarax. Pathetic. He then winked and nodded to Zamet Haket. At that, the beings who were now possessed by demons, the previous Marines, all had their shackles unlashed as one. And like that hunting pack, they all stalked up behind Talax Antarax, their red eyes shifting around their faces, but locked on the Marines in front of them. They were drooling. All of them. Tarax then spoke over his shoulder, while holding the lieutenant in charge with his cold gaze. He addressed the possessed. "What do you smell?" The possessed all whined and whickered at the same time, but none spoke. None could anymore. Tarax then addressed the lieutenant. "I'll tell you what they smell. They smell fear. Their senses are far more pronounced than my own, and I can smell it like an open sewer. The whiff of terror from you lot is all the proof we need." With that, Tarax just raised his hand and pointed at the officers. The next few moments he and Zamet stood passively observing the slaughter of the Marines. The possessed screeched and then tore into them, slicing through power armor with distended claws and massive crab-like pincers that erupted out of their arms at a whim. The slaughter was great. Zamet just inclined his head and said, "Hardly a loss, but perhaps wasteful. We could have used them as a forlorn hope, maybe." No, wizard. We have lost nothing." Tarax then looked dead into the eyes of the sorcerer and jovially intoned, "We have 3 more battle barges, all of their support ships, and near 1,000 sets of gene seed. We will build better troops than these scum would ever provide." Zamet nodded with a wry smile as the two of them went back to watching the carnage, as the possessed continued their rampage. The ending of the Silver Glaives, for they were never true worshippers of chaos, merely children pretending. Space Marines. They may know no fear, but they can experience frustration. Oh, yes, they can. It is glorious to watch, to savour. For they, the loyalists, are so uptight, so controlled and tightly wound all of the time. With every breath they take, every salute they snap, every swing of sword or shot from bolter, they are worms, and I hate them all. I remember when all the other illusions were thralls to the golden goose, they also were without fear, because they had nothing to live for. Nothing to gift but their own deaths on pointless battlefields or backwater worlds barely worth the taking. The others, of course, always them. It never happened for us, of course. Always hated, always cursed like our father, Mr. Boo-hoo. But now they fear. Oh, yes, they do. Our colleagues, our little workmates, all talking at the liquid dispensers, but I do not. I will not. Not then, not now. It is because it is weak. It is the pathetic babbling of ape things, the instinctual twisted to no gain, corrupted. For fear is fundamental to the experience of being an ape thing. It protected them, helped them, but now it just defines them. So scared all of the time. Clammy hands, sweaty palms, shaking limbs, queasy stomachs, knocking knees, voided bowels and bladders. To be such a thing must be so draining. Always scared of hunger, of danger, a threat of being ejected from the herd. Cattle. The sad things are naught but cattle, their bovine empty stares. Their humble bowing is scraping, the glee at being part of something so much bigger than they are. They used to have fear to live, but now to live for them is to have fear. Mortals, pathetic. I made an elder sing its silent song for me once. It caterwauled its love to me in its silken harp-like chimes. Beautiful, immortal. So I transformed it with my bare hands, snapping, cracking, rearranging, stitching. Party in my truly divine potter's hands. It sings no more. It sings no more. Just mopes about the place, boo-hoo-hooing. Tedious. But somehow it always cheers me up, puts a spring in my step. Like a vampire of ancient legend, I feel it sustains me, just knowing it is there, infinite, yet no longer divine. I sashay into my sanctum, my secret place, and take in the wonders there. I raise my arms out wide and stretch them towards the vista of opportunities, the room of memories. Racks of weapons adorn the bearings, all lovingly maintained and made shiny by aforementioned not quite elder thing. I allowed this pleasure alone, although it gets a nasty little shock if it tries to conceive or plot of using any of them, even on itself. No easy way out, no springing anything on me on my home grounds. But it is a failsafe I will never really need. When I transform something, it stays in the shape I have moulded it into. This thing is beaten, so thus it shall stay. But I digress. I close my eyes and twirl on the spot, hugging myself before stopping and pointing to my arrayed arms with my arms. No poet am I, no, I am a sculptor. My art is in my hands. I allow it to pour out through my digital symphonies. My friends, they are waiting out there in the dark. So many friends to be made. So many friends to really get to know. My fingers indicate the weapons I must begin with. Farming oneself should never be rushed. Better to have and not need than need and not have, as they say. No, but one cannot take everything. It simply will not do. So, choices. But the bedrock of my ensemble, I always do this way. Luck. I need that, as it is all that I need. I have the power. I have the eye, I have the energy, the drive, the chutzpah, but I need the lusty gaze of her magnificence, her mysteriousness, Lady Luck, my only true goddess, for she can be fickle. I wonder if the owners of all of these weapons thought she smiled on them, for they were wrong. Every last bolter, blade, or pistol in my collection is a thing to be honoured. They came from my friends. And I chose wisely on all of them. Yes, I did. The claws of Cirrus Corvei, Cor, nevermore. He certainly wasn't. You see, I caught him nearly napping, and then I did some tapping, as of someone gently rapping at his chamber door. Distinctly, I remember he was such fun to then dismember, and his separated dying member bled its last across the floor. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. Because I took him with me and had him stuffed. But we can't do that with everyone. Oh no, he was a very special friend indeed. So of course I honour him with wielding one of his core claws. They are nice though, master crafted, as are all of my toys, my keepsakes, my prizes, my gifts from my friends. The other I chose was the plasma pistol, Ignis Irae, the fire of wrath. It is exquisite, ancient beyond belief. Oh, this is why I spoke of frustration for my friend who had this weapon. He was so valiant. First, lion, he did hear me. He turned swiftly. His hand presented me with this gift. I blocked his wild swing and broke it at the elbow, then yanked his arm out of his shoulder, damaging his servos. Lots of sparks, like a fairground sparky in the darky. He bunny hopped back like a wood or warbird, is what he wanted me to think. But I saw the chainsword just outside of grasp. I stood back and sliced his legs off one by one when he charged me, my core claws tearing his knees off one then the other. He flapped about like a wormy for a bit. Well, he did when I dropped onto his back and I took off his left arm and let my spittle slowly rain onto his face. He was so angry. So angry. Not at me, at himself, but it was to get worse. I slouched over and knelt before him. I put the plasma pistol back in his right hand. I let go. He tried to raise it, so I snatched it off him again. And then I put it under my armpit as I took his hand and broke his trigger finger. Well, twisted it off is probably more accurate, but it was very, very broken by that point. And so we continued. I put it back in his shaking hand. He tries to raise it up, and he loses another finger. The look of pure frustration and hate on his face. He did not cry. His eyes sweated out of the effort. He was bathed in it. The slick of defeat, the film of frustration cascading down his face like a waterfall. It was not the pain, no. He was a lion. It was the unrealized hate alone. When all of his little pinkies were gone, well, he spat curses at me with his eyes, but he never said a word. Not even goodbye. So I am elated this prime weapon of the ancient dark age is amongst my finery this day. Safer that it is a choice for the day. The first always had the nicest toys. A power core claw, a pistol to end rebellions, yes. I matched this with a blade, such a blade, but how I took that, my white scars friend, so haughty, defiant to the last. But I cannot dwell on it all. I am expected elsewhere. It is the deep of night, yet it is illuminated near as bright as day. Fires dance across the horizon like a cavorting circus, consuming all in their path. I should know. Me and my boys started them. I stand upon a precipice and look down at the handiwork of scant hours. We have unleashed terror upon this starport and its surrounding sprawl. We snuck in, you see, in the dark, slew our way in with alacrity. They were all but defenseless, all but. So we avoided those areas of resistance and off we flew to prey elsewhere. We leave those pockets to the Johnny-come-latelys. I look into the dark skies and see them falling like burning angels. And here they come. Metallic tears of hate filled with oceans of rage are back up. I follow trajectories. I know where to go. Time for some fun. Baiting boneheads is easy, but I know things. Like our father, but different, useful, Lady Luck. Or my own sire's gift. I'm not superstitious or a gaudy botherer. Just my smile at pure chance. I've seen it take the toughest in the most tragically comedic ways. So off we trot. I dive down into the fires and follow the largest pod, and Dreadclaws. They smash through structures, decimating the tallest buildings before thrusters fire and they hit the ground. I say hit, not land, as the things attack the earth as much as strike it. An outbound world-eater nutters. The whiff of crusted ape juice is horrific. Good. I land in front of Sarvak's pod as it opens. He jumps out first, of course, unmissable. The dolt. Amanthus Emperus, the Night Lord, said to the Herculean world-eater approaching him. Glad you could make it. Sarvak the Butcher responded. Shove it. You've wasted time. We could have done this hours ago. And have the defense field still up? Do you like fighting defense lasers then? Coward. An age ago, we wouldn't be needed. You're all soft now. Send in the 8th indeed. Pfft. We can reduce this place easily, but let some cannon fodder work for the World Eaters as requested. We're all supposed to be friends now, eh? I'm just wondering if I shouldn't just take your head right here, right now. You don't have anyone with you. Foolish, Enveros. Oh, really? At that, the Night Lord's entirely dark eyes flashed white, a lambent glow emitting for mere fleeting seconds. He then blinked and smiled before opening his normal eyes again, black as they were. Course decided, he then clicked his fingers twice. The snap echoed around the battlefield. Then tears erupted in thin air behind him, as long sharp talons gouged their way into the very fabric of time and space. From the rents in reality, a score of hunched power-armored figures slunk out and jostled behind their master. Warped talons. The World Eaters were now outnumbered, 2-1. Amanthus Emveros, the Night Lord, then opened his stance and grinned at the Lord of the Cornate Force. Now that pissing contest is over, let's get to business. 4 clusters of guard, tough, you'll like them. What are they? The main hub is taken. It's districts 7 through 9 and 13. 7 through 9 are a hard target of entrenched scions. Is that all? And 13? The Night Lord smiled. A gift of sorts. Ogryns, thousands of them, and they're all for you. At that, Sarvak the Butcher's eyes widened, and his glare deepened into a horrific grimace to most. But to his own kind, it was the closest approximation of a smile. What do you want? Clever. I want the ships. You get the slaves, of course. We get the docked ships. Well, the ones we haven't already boomed. Done. Now, you lead the assault on the scions. Use my men. Blood them. I will enjoy this gift. At that, Sarvak the Butcher took his leave, and then gathered his chosen, they alone. For this rare treat was not to be squandered in the rabble. The landing ground flattened, a foothold gained. The units then gathered and re-embarked their Dreadclaws. Huge thrusters exploded from beneath them, and they hovered into the air. Looming over the city like huge angry wasps, they converged on districts 7 to 9. When they got closer, the arcing chase of fire from the ground beneath was soon supplemented by lasgun fire that was far more accurate and powerful than any mere guard unit. But the armor of the Dreadclaws was of old design, ancient forging, and was mostly proof of it. They hovered closer and then unleashed their own fire down on the scions. The defenses burned and blasted. The claws continued into the center of the region, and only then did their contents burst out all at once. The chain axes of the berserkers tore through them in seconds. The scions were elite infantry, but they were not Astartes. They were not veterans of the Long War, and they were not world eaters. Thus, they were butchered. Savrak and his chosen had but a half-dozen claws. They used 2 lines to descend on either end of the Ogryn camp. The Ogryns were burnt to crisps on the edges, forcing them towards the 2 remaining camp exits. The World Eaters revved their chain axes, lit their blades with dark power, then charged into the regiment. The commissars had a line of Bulgrin slab shields arrayed before the Chaos Warriors hit, but Bulgrins were used to bullying weaker, smaller combatants. When the World Eaters hit their line, their size, speed, strength, and armored weight bowled straight through much of it. The Berserkers would use one axe to sink into the shield and yank it down, then using their other to tear the head and half of the torso off the stupid being behind, or would just bully the Ogryns over, then stamp on them and cut them, and proceed into the rest of the lines behind. Smaller human officers in black longcloaks were obviously commissars. Those cornates nearer the front of this tidal wave of rage would execute them with thrown axes, or even Ogryn heads, killing them immediately, so the Ogryns would not be ordered to run, to be confused. The World Eaters wanted them at their most feral, scared, angry, in perfect shape for the fight, at their prime. Chaos gifts manifested like campfires given off by some champions as they all butchered the bovine, angry, huge but untrained and moronic Ogryns. The bloodbath went on for hours. At its end, with all resistance destroyed and all resources stolen, the Chaos forces simply got back into their Dreadclaws and ascended up towards their ships in orbit. There would be no reinforcements from this location. No steady stream of ships filled with men and ordnance coming to the front. A small victory, but one that would build to the ultimate victories of tomorrow. It was nearly time. Time to strike. The sky. It was dark and brooding and angry, but it was not black. Always when I think of storms, I think of darkness. of lightning illuminating all for less than a second, burning its image onto the eyes. I think of cold wind, rain and thunder. But this storm is different, for the sky is red. Like a blood moon that bathes everything it touches with the taint of a red hue, but darker. Much darker is this. Everything is dark red and brown. Everything I see is the colour of dried blood. We have known for days that they were coming. We watched the clouds of red move towards us across the skies, slowly, methodically. But this time around, it is no mad rush. No dash from their boats to our doors, to smash what they can, to kill whom they can, and then leave like thieves in the night. This time is different. This time the Norsca are not just raiding. They are coming to kill us all. Not just some. Not for glory or booty or rank. But all. This time they want to kill us all if we do not stop them. Our scouts had passed the horizon and crested the hills that lay there, but they never returned. 3 more attempts were made, but again, none returned. Not one. I'm glad I did not know what was coming until this moment. Knight of the realm as I am, still I am glad. For I had those 2 days of sheer bliss. Concern, yes. Fear, yes. But I now know that anything I thought was fear during those days was in fact the faintest slither of water compared to the now mighty river of quailing that now besets my very breast. Merciful lady, forgive me, for I am scared. They have not reached us yet, but we have espied the size of their muster, the nature of its parts, and it is a vision that no mortal should ever have had to see, ever have had to witness, let alone have it come towards us, toward me. Before we could see them, we noted their advent. The trees began to burst into flames in waves, like something was too close to them, and lit them with an infernal heat. On the very grasslands in front of us crept fire abreast with the immolated trees. Even the grass burned. But when they hove into view, it was more than many of the steeds could suffer. They bolted and ran rampant, trying to flee the scene of the crime about to be perpetrated. Squires, knights, and men-at-arms fell from their horses, so wild were they at that moment, but they are bred for war as much as we. Their initial fear, though justified on a myriad of levels, was soon brought back under control. The things that cavorted, lurched, ran, charged, dragged themselves towards us was beyond description. Norsca were there, in parts, but amongst all of the legions of hell. Beasts as tall as a building, skull-crushers and dark knights, red-burning demons of rage, all coming towards us. Standing in lines 50 abreast, we are now in position again. The thousands of pikemen, billmen, archers and men-at-arms that are to our right would usually fill me with confidence. We are all ordered and ready, have fought so many enemies together, but I know this will be the last time I see these men. These gallant pennants and banners held defiantly aloft. The cannon begin to salute the larger foes and more densely packed groups of these horrors, but our steeds are used to the thunder of war. I see flags raised on the hill where the command stand with the main body of the force. Our Lord raises his lance twice in the air, signaling that he has understood and will obey. It also tells us that the time has come. It seems the lords in the command tent believe that our charge will break the lines of the enemy. But I cannot see them running. I cannot see us surviving. But at this moment in this role, serving my liege as I have always done, it is no longer my concern. We counter, then simply charge. The tide of flames and red is speeding towards us so swiftly. I suspect the general believed that if we did not move now, then we would be the one receiving the charge. Mere moments pass before I lower my lance and it bursts through the torso of a red fiend, slaying it. I draw my sword and instantly bring it down to continue my work, as my warhorse thunders forward into their midst. The things in front of me die too easily. My sword arm quicksilver fast this day, so I make the most foolish of all mistakes. I begin to hope. As my arms rise and fall again and again, my warhorses hooves smash those below and rise up on occasion to destroy those in front. We see them fall in their droves. The holy light of our order seems to shine directly through me this day, and none can stand before me, before us. It was then, as these red beings of hate and war turned and fled, that I realized it was not me, or even we, that had elicited such a withdrawal. A shadow had fallen over the battlefield where we stood, but I had thought it clouds. I had thought that until it landed in our midst. Huge. Its arms thicker than a bedstead, its torso larger than a house, its hooves the size of wagons. It landed. Wings sizable enough to keep it aloft, then beat down on us, and many were unseated from their steeds there and then. It laughed and screamed obscenities as it began its horrific toll. The swing of its mighty axe took horses and threw them into the air, cleft plated rider and steed in twain in a single stroke. With each sally his axe took a half-dozen of us, his sword an equal tithe of pain and suffering. It could not be stopped. It could not be reasoned with. It would never relent. But nor would I. I would not yield. I will not shudder or flee. I am a knight. I was born for this, and this alone. As it comes towards me, I stand my ground. As my horse refuses to move, it is paralyzed. So I dismount slowly and carefully. The demon slows as well, allowing me to dismount, as all of its attention is on me. I look around for why, to see that all of my comrades have fled. The knights have unmanned themselves. I see the hordes of evil crash over the lines of the peasantry and men-at-arms. They have witnessed the flower of our force turn tail and run. They will not hold. I stow my shield with our family crest on Vengeance, my steed. I will not need it. No armor forged by man could stop or still the onset of the demon's blades. So it would just slow me down. I then smack his rump to let him know he can leave. He turns and streams away, faster than I have ever seen him move, even mid-charge. He will take my arms back to my home. They will know I did not die ignominiously. But I care not. I pace toward the thing, my sword raised high in challenge. It bellows its acceptance into the skies. Blood-red rain comes now in a torrent, as if at his behest. It will make it more difficult for both of us. For me, the grounds will be sodden, and will soon suck my feet as I move. For him, the blood comes down so heavily, it covers the mop atop his head, and runs down into his eyes. I will be even more difficult for it to see, so small am I. To some extent, the odds are even, but neither of us will have an easy time of this. He has shown me respect. Of all of the men who have stood against him today, he raises his own weapons in challenge received. We are about to do battle. It matters not who will win or lose. It only matters that I stand. It only matters that the dark gods see that there is still steel in the spine of humanity. That there are some who cannot be cowed, will never bend a knee. I now pick up pace and jog, then run toward it. Lady of the Lake, remember my name and claim my soul, for I, Etienne Delacour, will come to you in mere moments. Demon Princes of Khorne. Story continued from Khorne the Blood God. It is happening. The first time I am summoned. How? I have left none alive, none who I have met, none who I have fought, none who have seen my face, my visage. I have slain and slaughtered my way across the world in the wake of the Ever-Chosen. I have hacked and hewed my way across the realms. None have survived my fury. How? How can I be summoned? Who remains that knows that rarest of all secrets, that which I alone know? For I am a mighty demon prince, a warlord of the great god Khorne. Yet even I have one secret, the old secret. My name is Madrasaz the Marshal. But once upon a time, it was Etienne Delacour. And it is now that I am pulled. At first it is slow, almost furtive, a tugging on my soul. Ha! That which I call a soul. For I have not owned my own soul since that day, the Red Day. The day I became a dark prince of a darker god. I look back. I must find out the truth. I must explore that which I never pay any mind. For I am a being of the present, despite being a thing outside of linear time. I must walk my memory. I must find the hidden rat who blurted out my secret. For I must find the one who has escaped my wrath. I must remember. I was a knight. I served a lord who served a lady. I thought I did then. Now I know the truth. I spit on her. But it could not have been from there. They are gone. All of them gone. We destroyed that place, killed all of those people. I remember. I cannot forget. For all times are one for me, when, what and where have merged into now. All is now. Past, present, future. All is now. We destroyed the realms. I was a warrior in the columns. Each day we would raise or rise and do battle. Each day we joined our lines. And each day I slew many. With each passing battle I grew in strength, speed, ability. The dizzying vista of opportunity. For it was not merely humans or never-born I slew. It was a kaleidoscope of myriad forms and styles, and I killed them all. I rose in standing, day by day, making my way to the front of the columns. And each day I took more of the enemy than before. I slit their throats and broke the bones of my opposite numbers in the fray. Their champions I slew again and again. And Khorne smiled on me. He graced my blade with his glittering light, bathing the area with his red energies whene'er it was drawn. So much like those of the Knights of the Lady. Bright it shines, but with a hue of rage and wrath instead of light. But no less bright for all of it. I see red everywhere when it is unsheathed. I see their blood coursing through their veins. I will free it from them. I will make the blood flow. So much like the swords of the lords of my mortal life. Bright, blazing. But it was not white. It was red. My blade he bequeathed powers, and soon there was naught that I could not cut. Nothing I could not sever with its edge. Eventually, I was singled out. I was approached by the banner lords of Khorne, the great generals of the columns, and I was to lead. The columns had served their purpose. We, the warriors of Khorne, will become mighty. and thus it was time for us to march forth. But they wished me to lead one of the columns, for I was chosen, they told me. Then when the ever-chosen roused the guards, when the world of my birth was ripe, we marched forth. I took the lead of a band, and we performed our role to the satisfaction of the great god Khorne. For he raised me up and blessed me time and time again. I watched my universe end. We had won. Yet it was not the conclusion, and in time we were unleashed again. An age passed. The columns returned to the wastes of my master's realm, but then we were ordered to take our banners out, for a new world had formed, and I was tasked with a greater role, to bring terror to the realms. I chose my weapons and attendants, a few, a sacred band, 7 others only. My destiny before me, I could see it now. We were 8, the holy number of Khorne. I was on the path. None would gainsay me. None. And thus we few marched through the realm gates. We struck at the soft underbelly of the realms. My band never exceeded the sacred number of 8. When a more powerful applicant wished to join, they took an existing spot by dint of combat prowess alone. We cleaved those before us, hunted other chaos warbands, took their leaders' heads, took their weapons and trinkets of glory, gifts from their gods. And I burned them all, destroying them as supplication to my lord, to Khorne. My line prepared, my deeds mounting to a veritable avalanche, my boons beyond counting. I walked the last path, the most dangerous of them all. I sought apotheosis, and I ordered it and acted it. The 8 of us took 7 cities in 8 days each, taking 88 heads in 8 piles in 8 places in each town we struck down. We then took 8,888 prisoners to the 8th gate of the 8th city, a city controlled by a mighty man of magic and faith, but just a man. And we slaughtered those prisoners in 8 hours exactly. When the last one fell, his head torn from his shoulders by my bright blade, it happened. I had been a paragon for my god. I had brought skulls and blood for his table, for his throne. I had been deemed worthy, and I ascended. My body reformed, my sinews sizzled, my mind and soul expanded. My existence was augmented in ways that cannot be explained in mortal terms. I was a mighty demon prince now. When I transformed, we took the 8th city in 8 minutes, but enjoyed it for 8 days more. My greatest moment as Etienne, because after that, I was not him anymore, but part of a greater whole. I'm a bulge in his muscles, I am his sinews. I am Khorne. I am his thrall. I am his prince with minions of my own, but really, they are his men. Always. They are his. I rage at this. He knows. He enjoys it. So I rage all the more. But I do it in his name, while reviling it also. Torn asunder, I do the same to reality and all that I meet. They are his ties. They are my rage. They are my damnation. I do not care any more. No more than he would. And I am he, and he is me. But he is more. So we are him. I slew my friends eventually. I slew them all because they were not my friends anymore. They were his friends, Etienne's. So I crushed them under my new hooves. They fought hard. I expected nothing else. nothing less. But I slew them. Not immediately, oh no. We raged across the lands, but we left none alive. Ever. We got them all. We would not ambush, we were not cowards. We would herald our advent, make our intent plain. But we did not reveal ourselves to numbers we could not take. Challenges we had aplenty, pushing the edges with each fresh slaughter. But we were not idiots either. Rage, but rage contained, released when best, as a sacrament to Khorne. I am not an insensate, nor a thirster. I serve a different purpose. For them is the savagery of war unfettered, bellowed as a challenge to war, things of pure destruction. For me, there is more and less. For I am a prince, a demon prince. And a prince is either a leader of throngs of warriors, or a prince is a solo slayer roaming for adventure. I was the latter. I stalked through the realms, through the deepest, darkest edges of my lord's domains. I skirmished with my lessers of the domains of Tzeentch and Nurgle. I challenged and bested the border princes of Slaanesh thrice. I wandered deeper into my own lord's realm. I wandered further for things to kill, skulls to take. And thus I strode through pathways I did not know, and few did. And I wandered here, to this reality. No different, but utterly different. Nothing had truly changed but the scope. For here everything is done so much larger. Like this is the original, and I had been residing in a mere shadow, a copy of this universe's splendor. For the stars were filled with lights, and each light was a world to be conquered. And when I came, I was granted one of those worlds. My God gave it to me, to raise my numbers, and as he was here, so I was also. And instantly, I knew who was where, and what was what. Different, but not. The anathema, his soldiers, so like the golden warriors of lightning, but also so much darker. I had faced neither yet, so I built my arms, my armies. I dominated my demon world, cowed all, forced them to rigor, to vigor, to honor, to constant excellence, to constant war. We prepared, we set our claws, swept our wings and soared across battlefields I flew, taking stock, taking revenge on those who shirked or irked or were too slow. And I fought the best, and made them better. When the doors to the stars were opened, we did not pour through like the scum of Nurgle. We did not storm through like the minions of the Catamite. We marched. We strode forward in order and with discipline. We came, we saw, we destroyed. None should know my name. None. All are gone. How am I summoned? Story continued. I feel the tug become more insistent, more strong. I follow it. Out of curiosity is what I tell myself. But it is not true. He had my name. How? And then I know. My consciousness manifests inside a flame. My power not fully manifest. It is for communication only. I look around a dusty room, and I look at him standing in its center. I know how he knows, the little snot. But I will play along. Who dares summon the Marshal, Madrathaz? I summon the perfect night. In the name of Khorne, I do. Etienne Delacour. Or is that Delacour? He thinks himself so clever. I play along. Etienne Delacour was my name. It is now the Marshal Madrathaz. He cried for the name. Clever, clever, clever little man. But oh, what is this? No man at all. A knight. But no longer in shining armor. A knight of this strange universe. A marine, all in red. He talks at me, asks me questions, seems to drag things out. I lose interest and attempt to leave. But it is then that I find I cannot. He smiles at me in that red power armor. And in that instant, a second, third, fourth, all the way to the 8th level of new runes dance around the circles he has created. This is no normal summonation. Surely, it is my first. But this is no normal being, no normal event. Even for an dangerous warrior of the anathema, though he serves him not now. He chants as he smiles at me. He smiles in victory. I lose sight. I cannot move. I cannot retreat from this. I cannot fully manifest to tear out his throat. And in the next moments, I am trapped. To be continued. Deathguard Sorcerers. Once, so long ago, before he had even met his master, his name had been Cagliostro Varsal. He was touted as one of the most gifted psychers in any librarian. Not the most powerful, which was odd, but his ability, his aptitude for the arcane, was astonishing to any of his peers. But back then, he, like all psychers, was despised, would be sent to distant worlds in insignificant expeditions. But this was purely to get rid of him, was what most believed. Yet in his time, away from the prying eyes of those with rank enough to stop him, he studied. He garnered many artifacts and tomes of hidden outlawed knowledge. And luckily, during the period leading up to and immediately preceding from the Council of Nicaea, Cagliostro had made himself scarce and joined a distant siege detachment, hiding from his detractors and using what others called boredom time between events to study and practice his craft. He became powerful indeed, far more so than he should. As the heresy began and the situation changed, Varsal made common cause with someone who could protect him and see his many uses. A rarity in the Deathguard of that period. But in his master, he found what he needed. For in all of the Legion, in all of the expeditions he had ever participated in, only Ulic the Unreasonable seemed to be open to his friendship. Of course, it was largely one way, from he to Ulic, but the pact gave him what he wanted. As the influence of the grandfather swept throughout the Legion, his presence was no more lauded, but it was less likely he would wake up with a crack grenade beneath his pillow. Now, after all of these centuries, he had transformed. Few remembered his old name. Now, he was Baron Bloatfest, the Turgid. Fewer still knew the full name of his master, Ulic, as it should be. For they were ancient now, ancient. Often he had been at the front, where the fighting was fiercest, where the fire was most harsh. Yet he always pulled through it. Praise Nurgle indeed. His miasmas of flies would shield his brothers as they strode forward. His pestilences would infest and bring down walls to allow the Marines entry to even the most seemingly invincible bunkers. His plague winds would sweep before their advance, annihilating all it rolled over, as buboes and pustules exploded from the humans who it touched, leaving them screaming from cancerous voice boxes or whimpering for the release of death. At least he was all too happy to grant them, if they would not turn to his master for aid, of course. But now he was one of the elect. He was chosen, for he now sat at his master's side, always. Some thought this was protection against enemy sorcery, but the Baron knew better. He knew the unreasonable one was in no danger whatsoever. Yet perhaps this would lead others to believe that he was vulnerable to magic. Cunning. Ulik had always been a conundrum, even before the heresy, but now, Ulik alone of all of his peers in the Deathguard had constantly risen since Estevan, and Baron Bloatfest hove to him like an acolyte its teacher, for only here was he safe. Only here was he valued, and only here, at Ulik's side, was he free. For his master was both generous and patient, and with his patronage, if the Baron could explain the need, the benefits, then there was little he could not ask, little he could not request, as long as he provided those results. There was competition, of course, the word-bearer. How he hated that wizard, even more gifted, even more powerful, some said, able to even worry 1,000 sons in the art. Yet the Baron knew this one was a cat's-born lickspittle, a run-around and herald, and every day, in some small way, the Baron planned the downfall of the word-bearer. For one day, inevitably, he knew, they would cross hexes, would trade spells. He could feel it in his marrow, in every boil and blister. Yet with those artifacts he had gained, he was confident it would not be a mismatch. He only needed a sign from his master, from the unreasonable one. Then he would catch the fly and pin it to his wall, and torture said wizard for his secrets, even were it to take all eternity. The Blue Scribes. The Origins of Magic. Horus was weak. All is near completion, so close. Thus, I do what I am best at. I walk the strands of fate. I take out my bowls and pour in the many liquids, unguents, and balms. I prepare the cardinal points, sacrificing as I do. I burn through a score of rabble, a satisfactory scream coming from each as I drag them onto the altar and then slit their throats. Their blood forms runnels that coalesce on the ground, a circle formed from the blood of the innocent. But are any of us truly innocent? Either way, the supplications have been given, the debt paid in advance. Story. And it is now that I step inside the perfect circle. Not easy to do, I can assure you, forming a perfect circle. It takes a level of skill and mathematical knowledge no longer seen these days. Patience and diligence, that is more a test than a feat. For all that I do takes concentration. Not for one instance do I lose it. My center, my silence. Not when I have to slay the baselines for the tithe. Not when they scream and flail their last in my clutches. I am Astartes. Do they think they could possibly break my physical hold on them? I am blessed by the 4 gods. Do they think they can escape my thrall? Nay, they cannot. And as their spirits float across my eyes, their spectral faces maintaining the ghoulish visage from their deaths, contorted further in the knowledge of their true fates. They know, and I bask in the anguish that flows from these souls. The repast begins, and I see them all wink out of existence with a final wail, as mighty Zinch consumes them all, one by one. For today, I give thanks unto the Lord of Change, the seer of all seers. For today, I look into the future. Sometimes I look on the behalf of my ostensible master, and I regale him with the events I see, but not today. For in this moment, I shall look for myself, to see if it is coming into frame, my plan. For if I can see this, then perhaps others can also, despite the new abilities I have from my actual benefactor. And I hunt my own image in the sea of souls, the wellspring of existence. For reality is what you make of it, and mine resides almost exclusively in the realm eternal, the waters of the infinite river. And I see myself in many places at many times, but cannot see as far as usual, not with any certainty. And that is exactly as I had planned. My enchantments hold. Excellent. But oh, what's this? A duel? Glorious. I home in on this moment to see what I can see. And there we are, on that world. It can be no other. Yes, certainty is given as I scry the surroundings. For once more I see the ranks and columns of the Kriegsmen, all rushing into combat, throwing themselves at my allies, as we had planned. For they are now being slaughtered wholesale by the warriors of iron and the sons of the night. The cacophony is sublime, and there I am, hovering over the battlefield, calling out my equal and opposite. So, they have able sorcerers on their side as well, it seems. And there he is, a shining icon of silver and light, a wizard of the Grey Knights. Oh, how I enjoy crossing spells with them. They have such a wonderful flourish in their cantrips, such forceful castings. Like children, they can shout, but they lack subtlety. And he walks amidst the Kriegsmen to find me. He thinks this is his trap for me. And it begins. He breathes words of golden light, calling upon his lord, his king, the corpse god. I allow myself a wry smile as I counter. With a waft of my hand, I nonchalantly pull apart the fractal constructs he sends at me. And as things heat up, as our muttering and chanting raises in speed and volume, I see a rarity beyond belief. For in the corner of mine eye, I see a tiny rent in warp space appear before I can even feel it. And out of it comes a floating disc of Zinch. And on that disc are 2 beings. One scribbles fast and hard, the other watches on, recounting the spells and curses that the Grey Knight and I trade with increasing alacrity. Both are blue, both are small things. And the test is a gripping one, for this Grey Knight is a master of his form. His sanctic powers should have burned me to a husk from the outset. He has more innate power in him than any I have ever faced. His spells are given the strength at least twice my own. Yet, as I stated, he is a child with a large stick. He bashes and bashes at me with it, the spiritual equivalent of a world eater. He is all attack, all power, no finesse. But his sheer level of ability, the amount of warp he can command, it takes its toll. I have been clever throughout our clash, turning his powers back on him, which he was surprised at, I can tell you. Where he is a prize fighter, I am a taskmaster and strategist. Light and shadow play across the field between us. The running Kriegers now ignore me utterly. They are burned and changed, twisted and corrupted by the hexes coming from the Scribes on the disc of Tzeentch. But it is time to go. I have fought the knight to a standstill, yet I am running out of tricks. If I stay, he may well win. May. So I do the only reasonable thing. I send his last paradigm-shifting spell in all directions, and he must watch their course, as he knows some will wind their way back to him. And they do, of course. His shields flare, and it is then, during this millisecond of his distraction, that I leap towards the Scribes. I bowl into them and through the portal at their rear, and I am safe. I am home in the warp. They glare at me and collect their scrolls, making sure that none that fell are not present, and while they scramble to collect them all, I merely tear another rent in space, and I return to my forces on the planet. My eyes clear, and I am back in the circle. So, the Grey Knights are coming as well. Good. This could not be better for me if I had planned it. Chaos Knights. Horus was weak. I step out of the circles as they dim, their power spent, my will enacted, my purpose achieved. In my hand I hold a weapon, a blade wrought of 1,000,000 spines, drenched in the fires of Khorne's own realm, quenched in the blood of the innocent, rivers of it. Yet it was only truly forged today, with this last crowning act. It is now prison as much as creation, for within this blade I have bound a rare being indeed, Delacour. A demon of Khorne, of course, but one not of this realm, nor truly of the warp, here at least. A traveller, a rarity. His presence will help, the conundrum of his existence lending weight to my true purpose. But I needs throw the dice again. Scry as I might, all is so blurred there. I require a delivery system, a guardian of this fetish. So whom shall I give this mighty tool? A question for another time, when the board is set. Speaking thereof, my time grows short. I must collect the last of the forces my master has ordered mustered. Let us recap. The times have been good. Tarax Antarax, Lord of Iron. He brings his army, for they are still that, his iron warriors. More than most, but he also brings his mighty machines, his allies of the dark and broken cog, and the relentless march. Excellent. Amanthus Enveros. He wields the shadows like a blade. His terror troops will be of high use. His presence will tip the scales in the horrors that will occur under those moons in the night. Their name, the Night Lords, will be sorely tested. Send their aids. Indeed we shall. The Alpha Legion have deigned to assist us on this venture or so. But then, from my services over the ages, they did truly owe me one. More than. But this one will do, to be going on with. They already sit amongst our victims' councils, cooking their food, washing their sheets, carrying their messages, rubbing their feet. Oh, how pandemonium will reign when we raise the banners. So close now. Zamet Haket and his sorceries stand with us also. Me again, of course. I know things they wish to know. This is 1,000 suns price. Hence they are invested. They gain their 30 silver scrolls of knowledge the second we win. So they need to ensure that we do, and that I survive especially. Sarvak the Butcher and his walking wounded are aboard. Brains minced over millennia. It is a wonder any are still alive. The original world eaters. Yet, here he is. One of the most gifted, one of the originals, one of the best. And all of his many, many defilers and cohorts of berserkers. We will hurl them at whatever we need to die the most, and they will certainly die. My own word-bearers are gathered, prepared. They will crush the enemy with their numbers, will annihilate them with the hordes they summon and the ardour of our feats at arms. I am amply represented. My power not merely personal. I earned my seat at the table, my place at his left hand. My master brings his own forces, mightiest of all in number, equipment, blessings, and ships. His forces will blot out the skies, quite literally. For when he releases the swarms, well, it will be entertaining to hear the wailing. I look forward to that. 2 more need to be gained, for completion's sake. But not of the black, but of the green. A representative of the old 16th, not Abaddon's chimerical lot. A true son of his sire, so to put it. Few remain, but they are there, and I must have them. And of course, we simply cannot move without one born to the purple. The favoured of Slaanesh, their abilities, their chaotic effect. They must be garnered, but I will move on that once I have concluded my affairs here. For we have many, but a full sweep is always a heart-warming spectacle, and not just Marines. But oh, so much more I have gathered. The Cardinal will be important in this one, I have no doubt. My investment returned. When I play that card, it needs to be to maximum effect. The men and women who have already had their colours changed by him, useful indeed. So many pieces arranged, but not all. Time to go. Not my body, of course, my sentience, my soul, for I must summon one who I own, utterly. Yet to do so, I must contact him. Ah, how I remember those days when we first fought alongside each other. His knightly house attached to we word-bearers. Of course, we were haughty. They were brave, though. I respect that, you see, very much. Courage. For as we fought in the streets, hab block to hab block, there they were, stalking the largest thoroughfares, cunning and quick. They took enemy armor apart in detail, always. And when we faced Xenos races, they were often engaged as bitterly as we were. The macrocosm of the microcosm. For they faced beings as large as themselves, with every bit the iron we did. And they, like we, were the most loyal of all in the Crusade. The most emphatic, the most zealous. In different ways, but with no less purpose. No less guts, no less drive. They were warriors. Only they and the princeps did we truly respect. Then things changed. And the knights were thrown into disarray. The conundrum. Their ancient ways of honour were as rigid as the armour of their steeds. Inflexible. They swore fealty to the Imperium, but they had sworn it via us. They had sworn to Lorgar the Aurelian, our Primarch, to the Word-bearers, and thus they chose to break faith with those that they had fought beside, bled with, or to see their oath as being issued to a distant figure at the centre of the Imperium, a mythical god in gold. One we proved was a liar. So the choice for them was simple, yet the ramifications. The first years were hard on them, very. And as we all changed, the blood, the lust, the disease, the mutations, not only of form, but of function and thought, of essence, it altered us all. It brought out the truth. I became a powerful sorcerer, my mind freed, as was my lord's. But they, the knights, they were shorn of their excuses and pretenses, and we saw them for what they were. Take away the pomp and snapped uniforms, hauteur and honour. Well, you were left with gallants. No, deeper than that. They are people pleasers. And when we ordered them to murder, they did. And the turmoil stripped away everything. And soon they were our dogs. We pointed, they destroyed. And each atrocity threw them further down the hole. To atone, they obeyed. But that created more guilt, so even more obsequiousness. It was only to us, we Marines, of course. Any normal baseline humans were treated as we did, like gnats or pigs, to be farmed and used. The knights fought with us in the heresy, through the scramble away from the avenging loyalists, and all throughout the later years, the later wars between the legions in the Eye of Terror. Now, I activate them again. I summon them to my side. I sit, and I walk the path, separating myself from my mortal vehicle, my body. I know his dreams. I have visited them so often over the years. And he is in a perpetual state of waking nightmare. I follow his despair and misery, despite how he cloaks it in arrogance and self-import. And there he is. I flow through the warp, allowing my consciousness to merge with his. I look through his eyes. I can see what he sees, smell what he smells, feel what he feels. I involuntarily shudder at the pure exaltation of the depth of his nuanced existence. He is stuck inside his night, a walking tomb as much as any Helbrute or dreadnought. He is trapped, it will never look for a doorway or aperture to escape his incarceration. He is mine, and so are all below him, an entire house of the finest warriors, all mine. I look through his eyes. He leads them. In his mighty walker of power and purpose, he walks out, revealing himself as the column of Imperial Guard tanks and transports trundles along. They see him. They react by slowing, then immediately firing. The mortal crews are surprisingly awake this day, but their volleys of battle cannon fire do naught to his demi-titan, his knight. The iron shields flare, explosions rippling along their exterior. Like a magical egg of protection, he sits in plain sight, goading them. They advance, of course. This is not bravery. This is ignorance and arrogance. Monkey see, monkey do. So the monkeys move into their standard patterns. We know them. We know them all. My thrall knows what will happen now as well. He did before he even revealed himself. A cadre of Lancer Knights now appear to the column's rear. All are smaller than the one at the head, of course. He has the most powerful of all of the suits there. He is their leader. Yet, they are knights. Their lances fire into the column and melt transports as if they were ants beneath a lens. When they get into the back ranks, they tear them apart. Confusion reigns. The front of the column attempts to eat the distance between themselves and my slave. They have the vain hope that range was the issue, that their weapons could not punch through his protection unless they were closer. Foolish. It makes little difference. Not to him. I have pulled him more than one favor to make his armaments the best that can be gained. He walks forward, ignoring their feeble attempts to even scratch his suit. And the war dogs arise from the flanks. Smaller harbingers of dread. They are larger than a dreadnought, smaller than a knight. But the packs of them fall on the transports and tanks on the sides. They carve into them with huge chained weapons, melting them with close-range fire. They stomp and stab and throw the men and women who fall out of the transports in a vain attempt to escape the slaughter. My thrall steps forward, stamping on hundreds of them as he goes. His firepower kills all that is not destroyed by the others. It is over within 3 minutes. They are all dead. A full regiment of guard and armor gone. This is what we need for the Crusade. Of course, we need the titans my master has secured. But knights? Oh, how I adore knights. Not just for the titillation of their misery, but their strategic and tactical use. I do so look forward to deploying them when we get there. When we raise our banners. When the Crusade is finally called. And we head to Abundance Tertius.